Alright, welcome everyone to the first recording of the Tales of Old Appalachia. Here today we are going to be looking into my visit in the Smoky Mountains and what I encountered on my first ever visit to the Smoky Mountains and how much really happened in the first visit that I ever made to the national park itself. So without further ado, let's get right into the story. So this tale of my Smoky Mountain visit starts off with me and my family heading up to a long-planned vacation that we were all very excited for, and really what was going on is I had already looked into the scary spooky tales being myself. I was very inclined with this stuff and I wanted to see what was going on. I've heard a lot of different tales and it was all very exciting, but really when you get down to things, you just know that you're going on vacation and you don't really expect much of anything at all. Well, I would soon realize that that was beyond the point of realization what I was going to be seeing there during my visit in the Smoky Mountains. So the first day that we got there, we didn't really notice much of anything at all. Really what was going on is we were taking in much of the beautiful view, and it was just so astonishing. The beautiful mountain landscape, the high peaks, the sharp ridges. Everything was crisp and clean, and you could notice the fog, or the smoke as it's called in the Smokies. You could see that rolling over the hills off in the distance. It was such a majestic landscape, and a very beautiful place at that. But something that none of us really realized is what kind of went on in the history of the Smoky Mountains. Being as old as it was, there had to be some sort of history. We all understood that there was different spooky things in the mountains, but we never really understood what the mountains foretold and what they held between the hollows and the sharp ridges below their peaks. So soon after our first day, we headed to bed, seeing as we got there around 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We headed to bed around 10 p.m., and my first night, I was staying in the most odd room of the entire cabin that we were staying in. Here it was up against the woods, and already I can tell you that this was somewhere that I did not want to be, right up against the woods. The main feature of the Smoky Mountains is what lurks within the woods. When you are on the trail and when you are on the roads itself, you don't get any encounters because most of the creatures here, most of whatever presences we discovered, don't like to go out into public or out in the open. But once you are up under the canopy of the trees, you really start to see what's going on here, and that's why the number one rule of the Smoky Mountains is to stay on the trails, because there's a lot more going on than just bears and wild elk. So on my first night, I had the feeling that I was being watched. Now this usually happens on my vacations, as I've had bad experiences in the past, so I'm already set to that very scary night mode. But this was nothing normal to me this time, because I saw a shadow off in the distance by the kitchen window. So the first time that I've ever done this, I've quickly grabbed my flashlight and checked, with my heart pounding like a drum. This was the first scary encounter that I've noticed. I thought to myself it was probably in my head. Normally I would not say that, but because of the scary circumstances and because of all the scary movies and shows that I was watching, I really must have seen something in my head. Of course I couldn't have just seen the shadow on the first night after I haven't even done anything. I haven't even upset anything yet. Hiking through the woods, it couldn't have been anything, but it was. I would later go on to find out that multiple shadow reports from my family members would also be sent in around the house because of the spooky landscape. When we had gone to that cabin, we had made something mad. Something did not want us to be there. Something had a special home there, and they did not want us there. Whatever it was did not want us there. And by the second night, it was already getting more worse. I had my phone right beside me, my cell phone in my hand the entire time, just in case anything would try to attack, because this wasn't the normal spooky watch feeling that I have encountered. I have almost a sixth sense. I notice a lot of the times eerie things, and I just let them be because I know a lot of the time they're harmless. Nothing's really going to bother me. But the problem with this was, it was the feeling of immediate danger. Something that I normally don't have happened or with my encounters. And this was something a little more odd because I had never really felt this way. I've only felt this way a couple of times, and that was in the more severe places that I've stayed and areas that I've been in. But here, I really started to notice what kind of a being, or what beings, and what energy lurked within these mountains. And on the second night, I didn't really see anything at all, but I definitely felt a presence there. So I woke up the next day, told the rest of my family members about it, and we kind of all agreed that something was up with the cabin. So, being the people we are, we started to discuss what kind of supernatural stuff could be going on. We did our research, and it wasn't really too much of a scary deal as it was kind of an entertainment, because we wanted to see what was kind of going on and see if we could really kind of tell the tale of our experience. You know, whenever you get that experience, you're already thinking about how you're going to tell it and how you're going to get a lot of, I guess, fame from telling these stories. But really, that wasn't the point at all. After we did our research, we realized that there's a lot more to the Smoky Mountains that we didn't realize. There's a lot of tales that I will leave out from this video, seeing as I have a lot more content to make. We will be revisiting the Smoky Mountains, but in today's video, we're going to be talking about the specific encounter that I've had. So there are a lot of beings and a lot of energy that was brought up by different rituals and things that were going on in the mountains long, long ago, and some even recently back into the 60s that I've heard about. But mainly, the energy that we are discussing today was the one that was in our cabin. Now, I'm not sure how this got here, if it was already there from the beginning, or maybe if we upset something and tracked it into the cabin. But moving on to the third night. So the third night, we all started noticing that feeling of being watched. And it wasn't until that night that a very scary encounter did actually happen. Now, it may have not been supernatural, but the thing is that this is all kind of linked together, feels all linked together, so we're going to say that it is. But that very night, we all went to bed, and around 2 o'clock in the morning, a very loud rattling sound came at the door handle at the rear end of the cabin. And I was currently asleep at the time, but my family members all noticed it. Well, we had somebody from our family go out and check who was outside. Nothing. And this could be normal, seeing as people can run, and there definitely could have been somebody who had just run away, was trying to break in. There's a lot of locals who don't really live in the best circumstances, and they could have been trying to take advantage of the tourists there, such as ourselves. But the problem was that with all the encounters to come and that have already happened, we were already very scared, and we realized that something was up. So that morning, we headed out to do some more tourism around the Smoky Mountains, go see some sights. Had all the doors locked and all the windows too, to make sure that none of our possessions were stolen. And when we had come back that night, we all went to bed for the fourth night. And that night was particularly calm, seeing as we were all in the same portion of the house. We all wanted to be in the same portion of the house just for safety reasons, to make sure that if anybody was trying to break into the house, we wouldn't have been affected. We also took into consideration that this could have been a bear. I also have mentioned to my family that bears do tend to know how to open up doors, especially in the area that we were in because of experience with cabins and food. But the problem was that we didn't see anything, and normally bears would not have run away that quickly by the sound of somebody opening the door and heading out to see what it was. So, moving on to the fourth night, we all went to bed, and it was a particularly quiet night. And what I mean by quiet was none of the feelings, none of the occurrences, none of that happened that night. So we woke up the next morning and everybody was fine. Everything was perfectly good. And we all felt okay. So the fifth night came, and we were all feeling way better to go to sleep that night. We were more comfortable. definitely a feeling that we hadn't had pretty much the entire stay there. So we went to bed the 5th night. And that night, in my bedroom, one of my family members noticed me sit up straight and stare at the foot of the bed. That same family member looked over their shoulder and saw a giant shadow standing there. A humanoid shadow, about the size of a man. So, usually when you see shadows, they're usually smaller in size whenever you see these ghost spirits. This shadow, particularly, according to my family member, was the size of a human. It was a see-through shadow, of course, but there was this presence. You could just feel it. So I don't remember sitting up straight and looking, which bothers me truly, because I don't know what happened the nights before when I was sleeping in a room alone. I'm not sure what happened. Maybe I sleepwalked. I don't know. But that night, I don't remember that. And then soon after, that same family member asked me what time it was. And I looked over at my phone. That's when I started to gain consciousness and realize what was going on. And I said 3:59. So it was 3:59 a.m. in the morning. And this was about the same time that many of my family members would wake up every night. About the same time, 3 to 4 o'clock in the morning. And they would all have problems. Basically, they'd wake up in a cold sweat and their hearts racing out of nowhere. In straight fear. But me particularly, I would never wake up. And I've heard tales about this too. Some people are affected in the cabins whenever they're sleeping. They'll wake up and they'll have scary encounters, and their other family members, like me, will sleep straight through it all. And that's what was basically happening with me. So I don't pay much attention to it, and I wake up the next morning, and that same family member was hesitant to tell me what happened that night. All that mattered was that we needed to get out of there that day. So we did end up leaving a day early, and I did end up finding out the story of everything that happened. And it truly inspired me, because it was very interesting to me. Out of all the scary encounters that I've had, I've never really had one like this. I have plenty of supernatural stories within my family and through my life, but I've never really had anything such widespread as this. And what I mean by that is everywhere you go in these mountains, you feel the energy, whether it's good or bad. You feel the immense amount of energy that's in these mountains. And there's so much history there. There's so much that happened. Whenever you're traveling throughout portions of Appalachia, which stretches from southern New York State all the way down to Mississippi, whenever you're traveling through these areas, you normally don't feel the entire landscape with tons of energy. Normally you feel some certain areas, but this area really had a lot of energy in it. And that's really what inspired me to tell this tale and to create this channel, because I finally want to start coming out with different stories and tales, whether it's from me, my family, or other people. It was really interesting. Now, of course, there could have been many factors that could prove this story not true. There could have been the different factors that state that it all has a logical explanation. But when 2 and 2 come together, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, you really start to need to understand that something wasn't right here. So that was my tale of the Smoky Mountains, and that's one of my experiences. I definitely want to try it again. I want to see what will happen. I definitely want to go down there, do a little more research into my history, but the Smoky Mountains are one of the very intense areas of Appalachia to tell the stories. The Appalachian Mountains stretch all the way from the north to the south, so there's a lot of areas to cover, and that's why I want to get into these tales. But I will say so myself, starting off the first video on the channel, this is definitely one of the most intense areas in Appalachia. You could ask anyone who lives throughout that area. They all have plenty of tales, more so than any of my family members that live in Appalachia. But the Smoky Mountains have a lot more tales to them, and there's a lot more that we could dig deeper into. So that's going to be it for today's tale, and I hope you all enjoyed that very much. And this is just a test run, a trial run of the stories, but I thought my most scary story so far would be the best to tell first. So leave your comments down below and tell me what I could fix or what I could improve on, and I'll see you in the next story.